This is something I wanted to show off as a beginner sort of skill level of just EVA foam armor. Now, I used some things to have as like a template or a base off of, and even just like the gloves that I made for this, they're just regular like hardware gloves that I had strapped on to the gauntlets. So there's several pieces here that I want to go over to explain and show off that this is a starting point for some people. Mine was this rough, silvery gray armor, and this was the best of my ability at the time. I made this because I wanted to walk around at in my Artian armor from Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, I think. I think it was 3 Ultimate, or 4. It was one of the early 3DS games before they went into the generations and into World. So I wanted to, step back and show you guys my armor set. Now, I'm not going to be able to put it on because I don't have the stuff for it, and I'm actually missing the shoes that I used for the legs. I can't find those, but those were just some shoes, some women's high heel shoes that were my size that helped make me look taller while I was walking around. Wasn't that comfortable because I wasn't too knowledgeable about shoe sizes at the time, so it was just what I had to work with. Now, I would like to go in and talk about all of the little intricacies of my armor, what I used as bases, what I came up with, and things I engineered to make my armor what it is. Alright, so for this overview of my Artian armor from Monster Hunter, I'm going to start from the bottom and go up. So I'll talk about the greaves and the waist plate, and then the arms, the chest, and then the head. This whole armor that I had put together, I was using in-game references on my 3DS. Now, it would probably be better if I was able to get better screen caps inside the game, but of course, I can't. What, bear? Hey. Go that way. So I thought it was going to be easy. It was a very simplistic, one color scheme style of armor. Which the color scheme, it was pretty easy. But there are all these overarching shapes and domes on it. I'll try and get an image of it to put in here so that you guys can see. And it was turning out to be a little bit more complicated than I thought it was, but I went ahead with it anyways. This is one of the big times and first times I was using the EVA like foam mats, as you can see evident on like the waist piece on the underneath, and even the chest piece you could probably see right up there. That it still has that texture on the back. I learned about these people who are using the EVA foam mats for garages and even workstations and stuff, and using those as costume materials. So I decided to have my hand at it, and I made this. Now, I wasn't too good at templating things, as all beginners usually are, unless you have an art background with costuming and special effects. So what I had done is I had some old soccer greaves and shin protectors, and I used these, and actually you can see some of the glues coming out right there, but I was using old pieces of like safety equipment for sports as bases because I didn't know how to wrap things around my legs properly, or if I did, it was way too big and wonky, and I couldn't figure it out. Even some of the details that I have on these, they aren't totally carved in. Like, these are all Sharpie lines because I didn't know about doing the cuts on the foam and then using the heat gun on the foam to expand those lines. But even with not having those extra detailed lines, when I was actually standing far away, it looks good, as do most costumes that are basic or even just intermediate costumes where it looks good from afar and up on stage, but then you get super close into it and then you start seeing different like abnormalities and flaws, like my glue here on the shoulders that was, I was trying to wrap it around, but it just stayed flat like that. But these things, this was fun to wear. These would usually just fit onto my shin and curve up, and they actually have that curve you can see down there, that where while I was wearing the shoes it would curve, so while I walked it had that. Now I haven't put this on in many years, so it probably won't fit, but who knows, I haven't grown that much since I made this. The waist was a little difficult because I was trying to figure out how to attach the thigh plates to myself without going in and getting Velcro and gluing things to pants that I wasn't committed to give up to the cosplay at the time. Now, if I were to go back and redo this, there are certain things where a lot of these pieces would be fully formed, wrapped around armor pieces, and I would have a underbody suit with either Velcro or even stitched in armor pieces so that I could just have an entire set to walk around with and it wouldn't be half covering pieces of armor. The belt piece wraps completely around my waist. Your legs go through these loops I made here. And even though this was my first one, I had watched a bunch of people's videos and started giving myself a head start into cosplay. So I figured out a lot of things about using glue guns, certain techniques using glue guns, certain ways that you use the razor knives or the box cutter knives. That's what I was using at the time, was just a basic box knife for packing. And then even the tips for, like, I have a belt buckle. I don't know how well the camera picks this up. So this unsnaps, and it's just a straight on belt, and it fit on my person extremely well. That sort of belt is probably one of my favorites. I believe I made another one similar to that for my Destiny Hunter from Destiny 2. He was wearing the I think it was a Swordflight Crucible armor. Yeah, it's the helmet right there. I'll be discussing that in a later video. So these are the legs up. I want to talk about the arms now, which the arms and the helmet, which I'll get to last, are probably my favorite pieces on this. And actually, you know what, before I want to talk about those last, the arms and the helmet. I want to talk about the chest piece first. This chest piece, let me move out of the way. I had taken some basic measurements and wrapped foam around me to try and get everything all situated. A lot of these details, just like the legs and the belt, are just Sharpie lines that I pressed hard into. So a lot of these are just Sharpie lines, like all the detail lines. I wish I knew about the knife cutting earlier. It would have brought stuff like this out even more so on the very front of the chest. The shoulder pads are just some strips that I wrapped around and then did circular domes, or I say domes, but they're not domes, they're just rounds out of foams to try to make these gear shapes that the Artian armor had. This one, like I said at the beginning, that this is my first full armor that I did, and figuring out how to put full plate on that isn't traditional like knight armor is all up to the cosplayer. So we've got to do these things where we figure out like how we're going to strap it on. I've got some clips right here. This actually had a magnet on it that slipped down, and that's that. Okay. Now, the chest piece was probably the biggest and heaviest part on this, but my favorites are the arms and the helmet. And actually, I want to put this on in a moment to show you, but I had used another soccer shin guard as a guide for this, and I even bought some gloves to be used for this cosplay. Went through and started getting all these like gear textures onto it, but I wasn't able to completely figure out how to do the gloves because I wanted to do the upper arms as well, part of it. And I'm going to take a moment to put this on to show you why this is my favorite, because of the engineering I did in here. Okay, so these arms that I made, they have this sort of two-piece at the very back that's connected by a gear in the game, and I was trying to put that in. And they have this bend right here. And I was trying to get this bend in here, and I figured out how just making some rounds and circle holes to make makeshift joints on here. And as you can see on my arm, you know, it fits all the way up to my bicep right here and up down to my forearm with a good enough clearance in my arm where you can actually see my arm will bend. And this is probably my favorite thing out of this entire costume, because even though this was my first one, I was so proud of having this joint so that while I'm walking around and picking things up, you know, it's actually, you know, moving, and I'm not stiff-armed all the time trying to bend over and like touch things or reach at somebody. I can actually bend my arm and have all this mobility. Alright, now I'm going to finish off talking about the helmet, which this thing, it's pretty heavy, and I'll show you why in a moment. So, for the last thing of this video, I'm going to talk about this helmet. The Artian helmet was probably one of the most complex things that I did, even more complex than the arms. Because in the game, the entire armor set looks like it's just made out of metal. And the helmet, even more so, there's no eye slots on here. So I had to figure out some way to make it look like the in-game helmet, but also able to walk around in the con, because I wanted to walk around and show everybody. The first step was for me to make the helmet. Now, at the time, I didn't know how to do the templates of my own head. I had tried before, and I came up with absolutely nothing. I couldn't attach to pieces. So I had gone to, I believe it was Target, and I bought I bought a baseball helmet. It was like 10, 15 bucks, I think. And I had cut off the brim, or the bill, for the baseball helmet, and just used the entire thing as my base. So I was just building on top of an already made helmet. It's very easy to do that, and I would recommend doing things like what I did with the protective gear from soccer, or even this helmet as your base if you're first starting. You can just jump into using templates and foam cutting, but there's also a little bit more forgiveness if you're not too sure about measurements of your own body. This helmet, though, being as complex as it was, I had to make it look silver, but I still had to see through it. And I lightly sprayed over some plastic that I got, and hopefully this comes up. I want to show you guys this. But I lightly sprayed over it so you could walk around and still kind of see. It's a little bit hard to see right in here. But I had my brother who was walking around. He was walking around as Space Dandy, and he was right in front of me with the big yellow star on his back. So while I was walking around, I was just following the big star on his back so I could still see through it. It was very hard to see through it, but I still managed to make it see-through. And this was my very first full armor foam cosplay. It was very fun to walk around with. I hope I can come back and revisit this and make it even better than it was before with my new techniques and new skills. Thank you guys for watching. If you would like to see more, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll be talking about more of my costumes soon. Later.